Mhm. Yeah. So what I've gathered from it is that so we do like an introduction kind of thing.
Kind of. I was going to go off of, so I have the discussion board of our subgroup open.
Yeah.
And sorry, you kind of got stuck with the really short end of the stick because it was just you and Heather on your subboard.
Oh, that's okay.
Subgroup. So I have Soraya and Stephanie's comments here that we can kind of throw in, but I don't think this is going to be like the typical debate that she was expecting, but at least we can talk about it from each point of view.
Yeah,
which is better than nothing.
That's true. Okay, so, sorry, let me pull it up real fast, just so I have it
you're fine.
In my face. Okay, perfect. So it looks like I'm going to go first then, is that right?
Yeah, and I just give like a basic overview of, see, I read this on like Monday or Tuesday, so I have to go back and skim through it, but a basic overview of what yours states, and then I'll do the same, and then we talk about it, the differences.
Well, I don't think that we
all right, so
we are not going to finish.
Manifesto, or I, believe that the universe was not created by anybody, it was just already existing.
Yeah.
And I also believe that man is a part of nature, and that means that the human species has evolved, and there was no actual creation of human beings. We just evolved from apes. I also believe that a man's religious beliefs are molded by culture and not actually by experience or testimony. I strongly think that it's time to step away from religion, because I feel like it frees ourselves to our own minds instead of relying on God to make all of our decisions. We also need to live in the here and now and focusing on the eternal life or eternal perspective of heaven and hell stunts our growth on this earth. And we can no longer be restricted first. Instead we need a steady form of realism.
Yes.
So we need to be realistic about what we're thinking and saying and doing. Doing socially. We also, can you hear me still? Okay, perfect. Sorry, it went weird for a sec. All of the world's institutions and governments are made for our happiness, and so we need to make sure that we are using those to our advantage as much as possible. And that's what it says.
That is perfect, because I want to pick up right where you left off. So all of the governments and institutions are created for our happiness.
Mm-hmm.
Was the last thing that you said? Perfect. Yeah. That flows right into mine, where mine talks about to address the topic and prepare us for sticking to what our country started with in the first place. I'm trying to combine all of our thoughts here on our little discussion board. Religious freedom is part of the reason that this country was created and based on, and we should still be allowed to stick to that. And I know a lot of the, I guess I shouldn't address yours because that's your job. But basically to stick to the traditional ways that the country was based on and not sway from that, because that's what the foundation of the country is. If we try to move our morals from a different foundation, it's not going to be sturdy on, I don't know, that's kind of the visual I got of here's the foundation of religion and freedom of speech that we have, and our country's based on that. And to move it over would put us on an unsure foundation and create a lot of confusion. A lot of references to the Bill of Rights and even other countries that wish that they would have stayed with religious freedom were made in this article, and several times there were leaders that shared the regrets of not staying with religious freedom. So I thought it was really interesting that there were so many different comments from so many different leaders.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think. See if I missed anything. This article kind of warns and prepares the religious community for the threats that will be faced, saying that things are not just going to go away once we beat them. Once we are able to defend and overcome things like Prop 8 or the humanistic views, it's not just going to go away. People are going to keep fighting, so we have to keep defending ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a one-time thing. All right, so now we. Stephanie said something good. We'll pretend like Stephanie's here because she was here yesterday. She said the biggest premise for the article was that God wanted this religious freedom, that he wanted it for us to allow his plan of agency to be intact, and there were many things that were brought to pass to bring this country to where it is today.
Mm-hmm.
And that shouldn't just be based on chance or evolution, but there was a divine plan in action. So I guess that's where the contradiction comes in.
That's awesome.
What did you think of... Sorry, I'm not even going off of what the debate order should be in. I just want to know what...
Do we actually have to debate?
I don't feel like we do.
That's what I understood, but
yeah, but that's when we had 5 people here and everyone gets to be a spokesperson.
So do you want... I mean, I have just a couple things. Do you want me to just go anyway? And
Please,
then
yes.
you can go off of it?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me pull it up real fast.
Okay.
Okay. So I think that we need to focus on our own personal needs because putting God first is doing a disservice to humans, especially in society. I think that when we start to focus on someone else, we lose sight of what we really need personally, and that's not where we're going to develop our own knowledge. And especially since religious people consult God for every little decision that they make, why can't they just use their own brain and knowledge? And I feel like that's how society is going to really improve, is by our own knowledge and not relying on somebody that we can't even see or trust in. I also the worry of making it to heaven or hell really takes focus off of life, and I feel like it's harmful to you and distracting because when we only have that meaning of heaven and hell, we're not living in the moment. We have to do things for our own selves. And going back to what you said on having the United States founded on religious views, the United States has improved because of an increase in knowledge, and over the years, people have stayed away from God and gotten rid of their religious views. And I feel like that's the reason why we have such great technology now, is because we started focusing on our own personal needs, and that's the only way that society is going to improve from now on, is if we go away from religion and basically create our own morals and values to uphold within the United States and even the world.
That's pretty good. I think you have to think of where those great ideas and advances came from, what inspired them. Was it someone who grew up without religion, or were they really involved and maybe they felt inspired by their religion to create something better? But you brought up some really, really good points of getting away from the religion movement in the country.
Thanks. I don't believe it, but that's okay.
You were very, what's the word? I don't know what the word is. Good at persuasive. That's me.
Oh, that's good.
So I was like,
Well, I was sitting here writing down some notes just like as thoughts popped into my head, and I'm like, it's really weird going against what I actually believe.
Yeah, to
kind
be
of persuasive.
I believe it. Did you have a chance to read the other one, the religious?
I skimmed through it.
Okay, I skimmed through the manifesto, so I'm like, oh wow, it says all that in there.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, the Human Manifesto was crazy, especially, so when I skimmed through it the first time, I didn't really notice a huge difference between the two, and maybe you noticed it, I don't know. But the first one was written like a long time before the second one came out.
Okay,
and
yeah, was it like 1933 and then 1976 or something?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it was 70s.
It was like in the 70s.
Yeah, it says it is 40 years since Human Manifesto 1. So, and that was in the second one. But anyway, they were talking about like being okay with people with religious views in the first one, and then in the second one they were like, we need to completely get rid of religion. It's dangerous, it's unfulfilling, it's all of these different things. And another point that I forgot to bring up, I didn't write down, was the knowledge, like so in focusing on God and what He wants for us, we're basically stunting our knowledge of this life. And so they talked about I can't remember the exact phrase, but they wanted to put every type of movie or knowledgeable documentary on the internet and TV and everything like that, just so that we have a knowledge base of everything that's going on, which means like you could watch porn on TV because technically it would be knowledgeable, and like all these different things that you could basically justify putting on TV because, oh, well, you're just learning and you don't have any type of person to like go back to. Anyway, it was crazy.
It's almost, because I just skimmed it too, and I was getting to the point where I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is for real.
I know.
It's almost like completely deny your conscience, because I feel like everyone still has there's still good and bad in everything. I mean, there's things that are obviously bad, and there's things that maybe aren't so obvious, but that are good or better than others. And so my article was like, instead of like attacking the other side, it's like, this is what you can do. And so Elder Oaks gives 5 things that we can do to combat all of the attack that we're facing. And there are things like speak with love and understanding.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm supposed to go into a debate with things like this. Like, don't, the second one is don't be deterred into silence by the kinds of intimidation that the other side is going to give you.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay. They're saying, like, religion is absolutely bad and crushing and limits. Like, some of the lines in the Human Manifesto, I was just like, it limits the understanding and just, like, blocks everything. Whereas I don't think it does. Because being a member of the church, I'm like, no, I have such a greater understanding because of what I can learn from the Spirit.
Mm-hmm.
But then that goes back to freedom of speech and freedom of religion. Of you don't want to hear about what I learned through my religion,
right?
Because
no, you guys get it right together.
That's separation of church and state, and I don't know if that talked about it in this article or something else that I read. But the idea behind separation of church and state wasn't that church should never be involved in the government, but that there wouldn't be a national church that everyone had to belong to. That was the idea behind it. And I was like, oh my gosh, if people just understood that, like, that would be great.
Yes. Change the world.
But, yeah, so the yeah, he gives 5 things of, listen out of love and speak with love and what are the other things? To continue to insist on freedom of speech and preach doctrines of our faith. So it would still be appropriate for me to talk about things that I've learned through the Spirit that I feel I remember more when I learn things through my intellectual learning and then have it confirmed by the Spirit. It doesn't matter if it's math or if it's scripture study, but it's more beneficial to learn things multiple ways, and one of them is to have it confirmed and gain an understanding through the Spirit. So that was one of the things that I was like, yeah.
Yeah, I think that was definitely, like, there were a lot of strengths, obviously, through that talk, and I feel that one of them was specifically that, because, like, you can have a knowledge of something, and you can just shout out a dictionary definition all day long, but unless you believe it personally and have that witness, I feel like it's not an actual knowledge that you can take with you forever.
Well, and one of the things that the manifesto stated was, everyone evolved from apes, and you can't ever have proof of that. I mean, you can't have, the only proof that you can have that there is a creator is through the Spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't see Heavenly Father creating new worlds, but you can appreciate the details in everything that we have to realize that this wasn't by chance. So that's why I have such a hard time with, like, oh, you think that evolution happened? First of all, why aren't monkeys still evolving into people? Like, what made it all of a sudden stop? That's kind of what I've always wanted to ask an evolutionist, but I feel like I would be super offensive and probably not get an answer that I understand. But
What you want to know?
Like, why aren't things still evolving?
Mm-hmm.
And that's something I've always wanted to know. But that the Spirit can confirm. There are some things that eventually scientists say that we're not going to have, like, pinky toes or something because our bodies don't need them, and eventually they will evolve away.
Yeah.
But it's not the same as coming from different creatures. And one of the, I mean, there were obviously a lot of faults to us through what the manifestos were saying, but one of the strengths that I found is that since they are so present in their focus, like, they don't focus on the future or really the past, they can make a change right now instead of looking towards the future for it. And so, for example, in talks that I want to say it was President Irene or but they talked about being in the moment and making sure that like, you're happy right now. I think they kind of took it in a different step, but I think that is important if you are making a difference now. I think one of the comments that I made on the discussion board, now I can't find it, maybe I didn't write it, but one of the comments I made as strengths for the manifesto was that it really embraced the YOLO ideal. and that made me nervous because I was like, what happens when you forget the past and it repeats itself?
Right.
You haven't learned anything from it. Like, it's important to remember where you come from and learn from that example instead of just forgetting it and having a fresh start. I mean, it's important to know the basics that were formed.
Yeah. Well, and especially when, I mean, that goes along with exactly what you're saying, but like, wanting everybody to be the same, not necessarily in the same exact beliefs, but like not having religions.
Mm-hmm. I know. Sorry. Apparently there's more distractions on Fridays than there is on Thursdays.
No, you're fine. So, anyway, what I was saying is that they want everybody to be the same, and that's not how change comes. Like, if everybody was the same, they had the same values and beliefs, and everyone thought the same, nothing would ever change. It would just stay the same.
Well, and that's
so,
how not anarchy, but that's how people break out. That's how new countries get started, because they're like, I'm tired of believing what everyone else believes,
right.
and it's not worth it. It's not working, and we are all drones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that was one of the weaknesses. One of the weaknesses that I found.
Let's see. Oh, maybe these aren't my comments. That's why I don't recognize them. Like, I don't remember writing any of it because it's not mine. Let's see. Soraya says, humanists argue that religion is more of a tradition influencing a nation than something that simply encourages human morale. One of the weaknesses of this article is it's not supported well with any scientific research, and much of the argument seems opinion-based. One of the strengths is that it supports human choice, which I agree with. I believe that people should have the right to choose. If you don't want to have a religion, then that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But if you sincerely desire to have religion, the Spirit's going to come and get you.
Yeah,
Like,
right.
and it's not... it's not something that you can fight. If you have the desire, you're going to find something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a good point.
I'm wondering, so who are the writers of the manifesto? Do you know?
Yes, let me pull that up. They have a list of people who signed it. Oh, so they don't have all of the signers, but it says there were 34 signers of this document, including Anton J. Carlston, John Dewey, John Dietrich, R. Lester Mondale, Charles Francis Potter, Curtis W. Reese, and Edwin H. Wilson.
So do they have any, I mean, I'm sure they have lots of education and background information that probably just wasn't provided. But I wonder how many of them came from religious backgrounds, because, I mean, in the 1930s and even in the 1970s, it was still like a normal thing to go to church on Sunday.
Right.
And
well, I feel like there is always such an extreme with, so it, from my experience, I guess, I don't really know exactly, but from the people who leave the LDS church, like, they hate the LDS church. And then their kids hate the LDS church. So I wonder how many of those were first generation, like, I'm not going to go back to church at all.
that could be, and all it takes is a few.
Mm-hmm.
A few combining together. That's true. Let's see, what else do we need to talk about? Stephanie says that the biggest weakness of the manifesto argument was that it didn't seem factual.
Oh,
it just seemed like the author's thoughts were written on the page, and there was no real evidence.
Yeah, there wasn't any evidence. It was just like, we think that this is how it's
well, yeah, it was a lot of opinion.
Yeah. Well, and, I mean, how do you have data about that, you know? Like, if they're writing something so soon after it's happening, after they leave a religion or a church or whatever, and they're saying, we need to do without religion when it's never been done, like, how would they know how it would pan out?
Well, yeah, and I think, I mean, I feel like both sides, they aren't going to have the hard evidence that people want for either side. I mean, you either have the manifesto side where it's no religion, all education, all logic, and then you have the religious side where it's like we don't have proof, we go based on our feelings and what the Spirit tells us, and that's the way we learn. And so both sides, you have to choose what you're going to listen to, the world or the Spirit, and it's not going to be easy black and white of, oh look, there's the Spirit over there telling me that, and there's that paper proving that evolution is real.
Mm-hmm.
And it's never going to be like that. We're going to have to look to ourselves for education. I don't know if that makes sense. What else? Other thoughts on... Okay, so wrap this up in this wrap-up. Do you think the authors of your article were taking a moral high ground or making a moral statement? Why or why not? Oh, we kind of just talked about that.
Yeah, I think mine was more of a moral statement, and yours was a moral high ground because he kept talking about how you combat everything with love and patience, and like, it's okay, they just don't understand, so.
Just keep trying.
Yeah.
Just keep telling them you love them and you'll be there for them. And sometimes when I hear the phrase like moral high ground, it's like, I'm better than you, and you're not. But it wasn't.
No, that's
it
not
wasn't the case. And it almost I almost felt reading the manifesto that they were trying to take the moral high ground of the intellectual people are better than the religious people that just halt their learning because God doesn't want you to know about that.
That's an interesting point. I didn't think of that.
And I was like, wow, they're like really attacking people that are religious. Like,
they are.
What was there was like some profound statement that I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they said. I think it was in like the 1930s when I was like, wow. Okay, so what does it say? The manifesto is encouraging traditional religion to be brushed aside, and that it can be given credit for inhibiting individuals from helping themselves and experiencing their full potential.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, okay, that's a really powerful statement. Like, your religion is limiting you and all the great things that you can do.
Yeah.
Which, maybe they have a really limited view of religion.
Yeah. That could be it. Or part of it, at least.
Alright, so and the second question is, are religious folks, the only ones with values and morals? Can morality exist without religion? Why or why not?
Oh, man. I want to say that, in manifestos, they kept talking about having their own morals and values. And I think that people understand the difference between good and bad. They just don't understand between good and evil. And so I think even though they wouldn't have the Spirit or anything, they might be able to understand, like, I don't know, what works and what doesn't, but not at the same level as having religion.
Well, what you just reminded me of something. So, the light of Christ, everyone can have the light of Christ, and this is how we used to teach people when I was on my mission. So, the light of Christ is like this pen where you can, it can come and it can touch you at any time. Anytime you hear truth, the light of Christ can testify of that. When you're baptized and you get the gift of the Holy Ghost, then it's like the caps on the pen, and you can have it with you all the time.
Yeah.
So, the idea that that's how people gain their morals is through the light of Christ, they just don't know that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I feel good about helping the person that dropped all their groceries, as opposed to, I don't feel good when I just walk past them and think, oh, they're just dumb and didn't realize that they needed more bags or whatever.
Right.
But I think that the light of Christ can influence the morals of the non-religious people, even though they don't realize that it's...
Yeah. And they can. I mean, there's a lot of, all those articles in magazines where it's like 10 ways you can be happy or whatever. And they actually have some good ideas, similar to ones that like religious people would have.
Like, do service.
Right. And I'm like, okay, so, I mean, they're not completely lost. They have some truth, which is found in everything. So I think they would be able to come up with some good things, just not great, without the actual spirit with them. So
yeah, if they can bring themselves up to that level of, these are good things that I'm doing all the time, and then there's like the best up here where you're like, oh my gosh, I was already doing, serving at this soup kitchen and helping my neighbor, and like, oh, there's things that actually can bring me joy, that it's not just happiness or temporary, contentment. So.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other thoughts before we close this down?
I don't think so. I think we have to summarize, though. He said he was going to be looking for a summary.
Okay.
So what I found is that, I mean, the human manifestos, they focused on the present and your present happiness and what your personal potential is without the help of anybody else or any type of higher being. And then we came to the conclusion that, like, you can be good without the spirit and help from a higher being, but you can't be great, and you don't have the potential to become great.
Without, or you don't have the potential to become great with religion.
Without religion, yeah.
Okay. So, I'm going to say that this religious freedom speech from Elder Oaks was to warn and prepare everyone that does practice religion, not just members of the church, but that any religious person should be aware that the world is taking a turn and should be ready to defend their faith. It's not going to be hunky-dory anymore. You're going to have to be ready to defend and explain why you believe things and how your life has benefited from believing those things.
Perfect.
And relying on God and not man.
Wait, what? Why?
Who's God? What?
All right. Well, I think that's all we can really contribute. I mean,
Yeah.
Heather and I said pretty much the exact same things in our discussion board, so.
Okay. That's good. I know. I tried to throw in comments from Soraya and Stephanie too. So I'll go ahead and post this link, and yeah, hopefully we
Awesome.
get some.
Well, thank you for meeting. I really appreciate it.
I'm glad that we were able to get an extension.
I know. Okay, well, I'll see you next week.
All right, yeah. We'll
a good
set up a
weekend.
time at the beginning of the week for meeting.
Yes. How about we actually do that in the discussion board when we post the link? What day works for you?
Thursdays are usually the best.
Thursdays?
While you're
Okay.
in the office. So.
Okay, let's see if anyone else can do it on Thursday then.
Okay. Sounds good.
Okay, sounds good. See you next week.
All right. Bye.
Bye.